Hello everyone, I hope you've had a great week and weekend, and thank you so much for joining me here on this new episode of Political Peaks. Last week, I spoke to Alex Cragen of Utahns Against Hunger about how the proposed tax restructuring, specifically the proposal to increase state sales tax on food, would disproportionately affect low to middle income earning Utahns. Today, we continue our focus on the state legislature's proposed tax restructuring with a look into how these changes will affect Utah's youth and their education. I spoke with Heidi Matthews, the president of the Utah Education Association, as well as Matthew Weinstein, the fiscal policy director at Voices for Utah Children, to get a better understanding of this issue.
Our students are coming to our classrooms with greater and greater needs. We have many students with food insecurities and home insecurities and greater mental health and support needs. And at the same time, our investments in public education have been relatively flat. And we have made some grounds in a number of areas, but we still are at the bottom of the nation in how much we spend on a per pupil basis for our students. And we need the resources to be able to level the playing field for all of our students so that then when they get to school, they can be set up for learning and thriving. Right now, constitutionally mandated, income tax goes to public education. The tax proposal says slashing hundreds, both in an income tax reduction and an increase on exemptions and all sorts of shifting around. And what that would mean, if that's all that happened, would be devastating to public education and would not be fulfilling the promise that we have as the state of Utah to educate and support our students throughout the state.
Are we generating sufficient revenue for state government to meet its commitments? Are we able to invest in our education system the way that we should, in our infrastructure, in our public health, in poverty prevention? These are basic responsibilities of state government. Even here in Utah, where we're a red state, we are also pragmatic that we want state government to deliver on what the taxpayers needed to deliver on, especially education. That's obviously the biggest area that state government does something that affects children. We've been cutting taxes and cutting taxes and cutting taxes now for decades, and we're at a multi-decade low in the level of our taxation. And a lot of people would say, well, that's great, we have more money in our pockets today, but we're thinking more about tomorrow and we're thinking about the next generation. Are we investing sufficient resources in our children the way that earlier generations of Utahns did? Are we meeting that basic responsibility to the next generation? The tax package that's been proposed is actually proposing about a $100 million revenue cut on top of the $100 million we did last year and $100 million we did the year before that. As long as we keep cutting revenues, our school system is never going to get over these issues of high teacher turnover. Our high school graduation rates are behind national averages. We're not keeping up with the national advances on college graduation rates. So this has real consequences for our ability to compete economically in the long run, in terms of education, not to mention infrastructure, where we're billions of dollars in the hole in the infrastructure investments we should have been making now in recent decades.
Bottom line, from our perspective at the Utah Education Association, is really what's going to be best for our students. And that means that we need to have a growing investment in different plans that are out there that we know are going to be effective in making the biggest difference for our students. When there are elements in this tax proposal that directly impact the revenue source that is going into public education, we're very concerned. And this current proposal takes hundreds of millions from the income tax, which is right now constitutionally guaranteed to go toward public education. And we are told hang tight this other plan for how we're going to have a secure revenue stream for public education, we'll get back to you. And we can't. How are we supposed to weigh in on this overall tax structure when it hinges upon this secure funding source for education? The first response is, "Hey, do you want a tax cut?" And people say, "Yeah, heck yeah." But then, okay, here's the price. There are going to be more students in your child's classes or your grandchild's classes. They're already among the highest number of students in the nation. And what that means for each and every student is that they aren't known. It's very difficult for a child to have enough time and attention when you're in a class of 35, 40 students. And so when our citizens begin to see what the impact is of a tax cut, particularly an income tax cut right now, which is designated for public education, it doesn't weigh out.
Another main concern that is shared by pretty much all of those who are opposed to this tax restructuring is that it will further the already regressive nature of Utah's tax structure.
Right now, Utah's overall tax structure is regressive in the sense that folks at the bottom are paying a higher percentage of their income in taxes than folks at the top. At the bottom 20% of Utahns pay 7.5% of their income in taxes every year. And it's mainly the gas tax, the sales tax, the property tax. Meanwhile, at the very top of the income scale, the tax rate overall is about 6.7% because they pay a much lower share of their incomes in sales tax and gas tax and property tax. They do pay a higher rate on income tax to try to balance that out, but it's still a regressive structure overall, and that's not fair. That's not right.
I think we certainly have concerns about the most vulnerable among us with food taxes, with the relatively difficult to understand how the different taxes on services have been determined. I think there is a concern that it's unfair and particularly focused on average citizens, where our more wealthy citizens are receiving a much greater benefit.
State legislators say that one of the main reasons to reform Utah's tax code is to ensure that Utah continues to be a business-friendly environment, which therefore boosts the state economy and provides more jobs to its citizens. But Matthew Weinstein says we've already accomplished this goal. And in order to further incentivize businesses to relocate to Utah, we now need to invest in statewide education.
The Tax Foundation was just here in town not long ago, meeting with legislators. They're sort of considered one of the national authorities on whether state tax structures are competitive for business. They say that Utah is definitely in the top 10, maybe in the top 5, as having one of the best tax structures of any state in the country for attracting business. And certainly our economy is booming. We are growing quickly. We have a very low unemployment rate. So mission accomplished with that. At what point are we sort of going too far in that direction, getting to the point where we're not just creating jobs for the next generation of Utahns, we're creating so many jobs that we're going to be bringing in half of California moving into Utah? Do we really need that? We need to have a strong growing economy, and we have that. So now we're in a position to invest in our education system and think about how do we get Utah to the next level economically.
So, what's the overall benefit of investing in Utah's education?
They find that investments in pre-K have about a 7-to-1 return because it ends up saving money in the long run because you don't have to have then kids going into special education when they're in elementary or in high school, which saves a ton of money, and it ensures that kids are really ready to learn when they arrive at kindergarten and first grade. It gives them a real boost, especially the kids who are coming from the higher risk, lower income communities where they don't get the same support at home, with maybe their parents aren't reading to them as much and helping them with their homework. The high quality pre-K makes a huge difference. It's a very smart investment. There is an upfront cost, no question about that, but it saves us money in the long run and produces better results, ultimately a higher standard of living here in Utah for the next generation. That's been one of our big challenges that's been holding us back is our education system. And as I said, we've made it from being a low-wage state to being a middle-wage state. If we want to take the next step and follow in the footsteps of states like Colorado and Minnesota, move towards becoming a high-wage state, we've got to make the upfront investments in our education system that will pay off in the long run and ultimately will attract and help grow those higher wage businesses that are already looking at Utah and they're interested, but they want to know that we've got the workforce that they need.
I don't think you can underestimate the compounding effect of access and opportunity. We have an obligation and a responsibility to make sure that all of our students, regardless of where they live, regardless of their circumstances, have what they need to learn and thrive. Teachers and educators we're in the arena. We're the ones doing the work and seeing what is happening with our students. And we need to be looking to our educators who know the impact of funding for education and live it every day. These people need to be leading out and the trusted voices as we go through this process.
If you're interested in learning more about this topic, I highly encourage you to check out both the Utah Education Association and Voices for Utah Children's websites. Both include a wide array of data sets and more in-depth information about how these proposed changes will affect Utah's youth and their education. For the UEA, you can visit myuea.org and click on the Under the Dome section. For Voices for Utah Children, head to utahchildren.org. Huge thanks to Heidi Matthews and Matthew Weinstein for taking the time to sit down with me for this episode. I will continue to cover any updates regarding the state's tax reform, and will continue to speak with advocacy groups from across the state about how these proposed changes will affect their industry or business. Thank you very much for tuning in, and as always, you can follow us on all of our social media at Park City TV, and head over to parkcity.tv for more great community coverage. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll see you again next Sunday.